because sometimes you look at people and it seems like they're born with it. But here's the real truth. Confidence isn't something you're born with. It's... Hey, welcome to Wow Words of Wisdom. This is the podcast where we talk about all things mindset, all things confidence and taking action, even when it feels scary. I'm Sharon McCaffrey, and if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. Your mindset shapes everything. The way you think, the way you show up, the way you go after what you really want, and it all starts in your head. So if you've ever felt stuck, doubted yourself, or wondered if you're really capable of more, you're in the right place. Each week, let's break through those mental blocks, shift your perspective, and start making things happen. Welcome back to Words of Wisdom. This is the podcast where we talk like a lot of truth, drop some insights, and hopefully sometimes along the way make you laugh too. So I'm Sharon McCaffrey, and if you're here because you're sick of waiting to feel ready, then today's episode is really for you. So what I want to dive into today is confidence and how to boost your confidence, because yes, it is a skill set. And the great thing about skill sets is, skill sets are things that you can work on and get better and build. And I'm not going to give you like the fluffy Instagram quote versions, and there's no like toxic positivity here or whatever. Today I'm going to talk about just believing in yourself. I'm going to talk about being real, being grounded, and like practical confidence. What actually happens to be like a real coincidence is that I'm actually in the middle of reading Roxy Nafisi's new book, Confidence. But I came up with this title quite some time ago. It just happens to coincide now with that, and I'm getting so much value and stuff out of it. I think the key thing for me is that I realised that it really, a lot of the stuff that she's talking about really hits home. And she does break it down in a way that's honest, it's very digestible, but best of all, it's doable. So let's have a deep dive today, a chat about why confidence isn't, some mythical quality. It is actually a skill set, and what I'll be doing is giving you tools, stories, but actually proper actions to start building yours today. So the first thing I want to dive into, and I want you guys to understand, is this whole the confidence myth. And I want to clear, up the whole idea that confidence is either something you have or you don't have, because that's probably one of the biggest lies. And it's something that I believed for a long, long time when I was younger, because sometimes you look at people and it seems like they're born with it. They're strutting around like peacocks, they're talking loud, they're fearless, they're charming. And if that's not you, you start to believe that you maybe missed the confidence gene at birth. In actual fact, a lot of those loud people, what I've learned over the years is that they're actually lacking confidence, but they mask it by being loud. But then that kind of becomes our benchmark of what we benchmark confidence of. But here's the real truth. Confidence isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. It's a skill set that you build, and I would say that every day, I'm still building it. People confuse confidence with personality, but it's not about being extroverted. It's not about being loud or always sure of yourself. It's about how you respond to fear, how you respond to doubt and challenges. It's about what you do when that voice in your head says that you can't. Susan Jeffers wrote an amazing book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And for me, that's what confidence is all about. It's pushing through fear, because I believe we all feel fear. I don't think it matters how confident or not that you are. We all feel fear. But the confidence is coming from pushing through that fear. And as I said, that voice of fear still shows up for confident people too. They just don't lean into the negative side of it. So what is the real definition of confidence? And this is something that Roxy talks about too in her book, and it's something I've learned in my own journey, is that confidence comes from action. It's not from sitting around hoping you'll feel better one day. You don't wait for confidence to show up before you act. You act without it, and it grows then through repetition. Confidence is evidence, and that, if that's stacked over time, it's the evidence that you can do hard things, that you've survived the stuff that you thought would break you. Even when I started this podcast, as I said in the beginning, I definitely did not feel confident. And I felt very, very, afraid. I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid of what I'd been saying. I couldn't even stand the thought of listening to my own voice. But I acted anyway. And I would say even now, it's hard, but not as hard as it's not that hard anymore. Okay. I think what's hard is like still listening back to yourself and things like that. It's being the showing up and the taking action that has actually made me feel quite confident about doing it now. And it's the same with anything. I remember the first time, like public speaking, all of those things. So, but I think what we do is we avoid the action, we avoid taking the action, and then the less you take action, the harder it becomes and the lower our confidence comes, and then it becomes more of the struggle. And what you want to remember is like remember the first time like you try anything scary, like like your first driving lesson, your first job interview, the first time that you stood up for yourself, like the sweaty palms, the racing heart, like the panic, but you got through it. I remember going for a job interview years ago in Dublin, and we ended up having to do this presentation. I remember getting up, my hands were so sweaty, and I didn't get stopped. Presume me that, right? And there were other people that got up, and I could see them and stuff too, and some of them were so eloquent and so smooth and everything on it. And I remember thinking that I've made a real mess of this and being so nervous. But I do that stuff now without even thinking about it. But the reason I did is because the next time that an opportunity like that came to make a presentation and stuff in front of people, I didn't stop myself from doing it because of what happened before. I went ahead and done. I was still really, really nervous, like all the trauma from the last time lingered in the back of my head, but I pushed through that fear, and I was sitting the next time until eventually, it gets to a point where you're okay with it. Something else I used to really struggle with, and anyone that knows me will think like, surely not, but I used to really struggle to speak up. But now I find it hard not to speak up. Like sometimes when Stephen's out to me, he's like, no, don't say anything, don't say anything. It's like, if I find something that I feel is not right, or that I don't believe in, or maybe staff somewhere being rude or something like that, I would be the one that would speak up. But years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Just remember then, like I said, every time that you do it, the next time it gets easier. It's still scary, but it's manageable, and that's how it works. And it's just, you just chip away at it a little bit at a time. And that's why I said confidence is built by doing the thing before you actually feel ready. Because if you wait till you be ready, and I know I've covered that lots on these podcasts, you're never going to be ready. So let's get into the real stuff now. And what I want to explain to you is yes, it's not always easy, but there are ways to start building real confidence. So how do you do that? The first thing is keep the promises you make to yourself. That is so, so important. Every time you say that you'll do something and you don't, what you're actually doing is you're chipping away at your self-trust. And that's where confidence starts. It's in self-trust. And it could be tiny things, it could be going for that walk that you said that you would, not hitting the snooze 10 times, going to the gym when you said that you would, saying no to something that drains you. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. Just start honoring your own word the way you would for someone else you respect. If you think about it, if somebody kept breaking their promise to you, would you trust them? No. Would you feel confident that they were going to show up for you? No. So if that's what you think about somebody else, but then you're doing exactly that to yourself. If you promise yourself that you're going to do something and then you don't do it, well, you've broken that trust, which is going to lower your confidence in yourself. So if you constantly break promises to yourself, your brain learns, she doesn't mean it. So confidence comes from keeping your own word to yourself. And then, you need to sit with the discomfort. Confidence doesn't grow inside your comfort zone. I always said, anyone who knows me, they'll know me for this quote, staying within your comfort zone is where your dreams die. And it's such a sobering thought, but it's so true. Your confidence grows when you stretch, when you take the scary action. But there's so many people out there that they don't feel confident. They're not happy with their current situation. The reason that they're not happy is they're living in the same cycle over and over. They're not taking the action to stretch themselves out of their comfort zone. So it's like that definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So whether it's asking a question in a meeting, going live on social media, or putting your name forward for something, if your heart's racing, then it probably matters and you probably should do it. Because discomfort isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's often a sign that you're growing. And I remember when the mentor years ago, and he said to me, Sharon, if you're not feeling uncomfortable, then you're not you're not moving forward. And if you're not moving forward, then you're either stagnant or you're going backwards. Growth does feel weird, like it can feel awkward, even sometimes it can feel cringy, but that's the cost of leveling up. And sometimes even for me, like when I look back at some of the podcasts, look at some of the stuff in social media and begin that I completely cringe. There are some things I can look at, I just can't even look at them or whatever. But it's from taking those actions and pushing through those moments that have got me to where I am today. The next thing then that you need to do to overcome it and to build it is to upgrade your inner dialogue. And I believe this one is massive. And I've been so guilty of it for so many years. And Stephen has actually been really, really good at like reminding me of some of the things that I say to myself. I shouldn't say to myself, because if you think about like some of the things you say to yourself, if you spoke to your friends the way you speak to yourself, you'd have no friends. And, like imagine speaking to a small child the way that you speak to yourself. I remember it was actually a Roxy Nafusi workshop I was at years ago in the Helix in Dublin. And she done this inner child work with us. She got us to all the things that we were saying about, write down like all the things, negative things we were saying about ourselves. And then she told us like to pick like, a child, did you know, whether it was like, like a niece, maybe your own child or whatever, maybe a younger sibling, and then say those things to them. And like, there were people in the audience that were crying. So because there's no way you would do that. You just wouldn't do it. But we do it to ourselves all the time. So, the voice in your head, ask yourself, is it encouraging you or is it tearing you down? And you don't have to go like full on affirmation queen, but like at least stop being brutal to yourself, and that's why I think the self-awareness is so important, that you can catch your thoughts and sit with those. So instead of saying things like, I'm not good enough, maybe you try, well, I'm just learning. Or instead of saying like, I always mess this up, maybe try, well, this is just another repetition on building skill. A really good one that I learned a while back was that putting yet at the ends of sentences. So like that, if you say to yourself, but I'm not good enough to do this, I'm not good enough yet. That changes the tone of the conversation that you're having with yourself. So change your language, like change your wiring. Over time, it shifts how you see yourself and how you show up. Like I love a bit of re-talk. So let me share like one of my like really, really wobbly confidence moments. And it's when I was asked, I don't know, it was maybe 10, 11 years ago, I was asked to speak at a conference in Nottingham University. And was in the auditorium, and it's about 800 people in it. And I remember, I think what was even worse about it was the fact that in the auditorium, like all the seating went like that. So you could see everyone's face. I think if it had been flat, I think it'd be easier just to look at the back wall. But I couldn't even do this. You've all these faces peering down on you. And I remember being in the toilets before, I was sick to the pit of, my stomach. I was pacing up and down, my breathing was like fast. I was like, questioning all of my life choices, going, why did I ever sign on to do it? Why did I ever say yes? And some of the people that I was with were joking because I had high heels on and said, oh, watch you don't trip on the steps, Sharon. And like, oh no. But I remember walking out and my body was just shaking. And I remember the first thing I done was I just grabbed the microphone and it felt I done that to settle my nerves. And it did settle my nerves. And then I'm just here, just do it. I've rehearsed it, just do it. And I don't know, was it perfect? Honestly, probably not. But I done it anyway. And afterwards, I felt amazing. And then the next time, it was that little bit easier. And I think that moment changed how I saw confidence. It's not about being fearless. It's about being scared and doing it anyway. Before we wrap this up then, I do want to make this practical, all right? And I want to leave you with some little action points and some. So if you do just these 3 things this week to start building confidence. So the first thing I want you to do is choose one thing you've been avoiding. And it doesn't have to be something massive, like it can be something small but meaningful, and do it, okay? The next thing I want you to do is to catch one negative thought a day and reframe it. Write it down if you need to. And then the third thing is I want you to track your wins, even if they're tiny. Every time you show up when you don't feel ready, that's a win. And write those down. And then what you're doing is you're building your evidence list. And as you build that, your confidence is going to come from that. So to finish up here, like, understand confidence is not for the chosen few. It's not for the people who were born louder, taller, or with better hair. It's for you. It's a skill that you can build, with time, consistency, and patience. So if no one's told you this today, I will. You're allowed to take up space, to try, to wobble, to get it wrong, and to still keep showing up. So thank you for tuning in to Words of Wisdom. Please share this with someone who needs a reminder that confidence isn't a personality type. It's a skill they can build too. I'm Sharon McCaffrey, and I'll see you all next week. So just a quick one before you go. Over 100 million people listen to podcasts on a daily basis. And while so many come looking for personal growth, most never actually hit follow. So if anything in this episode helped you to see things differently, to feel a bit stronger, or just breathe easier, then do me a massive favor and hit follow right here where you're listening. This means that you'll never miss an episode that might be exactly what you need to hear that day. And most importantly, the more this podcast grows, the more I can keep sharing real value and even open the door to bringing in incredible guests to support your journey. So thanks again for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode. And that's my words of wisdom for today's episode of Wow. I hope this gives you something to think about, because remember, your mindset shapes your reality. The way you choose to think today will impact what you create tomorrow. If you love this episode, let me know. Share it, tag me, or send me a message. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Catch you next time.